Welcome to Girls Guide to the Military. This week I'm talking to Lisa Rielage about nominations for the Service Academy. So I really hope you enjoy this interview and you can learn something from it. There's a lot of information, and there is a blog post with all this information, so I'll link to that in the show description so that you can find all the information that you need to know about getting a nomination to attend a military academy. Welcome to Girls Guide to the Military, Lisa. I'm so excited to have you here.
It is great to join you. Thanks for inviting me.
So let's start. We're going to be talking about service academies and specifically about nominations from congressmen or other options. But let's first talk about what is a service academy?
That is a really good question because a lot of people only have the vaguest idea of what it is. So there are 5 service academies in the U.S. They are federal government-run colleges that have the mission of providing education and training to graduates who will then become officers in the military, Coast Guard, or the maritime industries. So many people are familiar with the 3 largest service academies, and that would be the Military Academy at West Point, the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. They might be less familiar with the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, which is in Kings Point, New York, or the Coast Guard Academy, which is in New London, Connecticut. The Merchant Marine Academy especially has a unique mission because graduates can either become officers in any branch of the military, or they become Navy reservists and work in the maritime industry to serve out their service commitment. So these schools, the graduates have a Bachelor of Science degree and then also get a commission or otherwise serve 5 to 10 years. And that service time is how they pay off their college attendance. So they're not paying it off in money or loan payments, but in time on the job. And in that time on the job, they're getting all of the pay and benefits of any other officer who is working that job.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 3 most common that people know about, the West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy. Are those the only 3 that require the congressional nominations?
Well, so congressional nominations are also used at Merchant Marine Academy. Coast Guard does not use any nominations at all. So much of what you will see about nominations is referring to the 3 larger schools, which have 7 different nominations that could be utilized. Merchant Marine Academy only uses congressional, and Coast Guard doesn't use any.
Yeah, okay. And you just wrote a blog post, which is how we connected, which I'm going to link to in the description because it does such a good job of explaining everything. But let's talk a little bit about the different types of nominations.
So I think the easiest way to think about the nominations is there's 2 piles. There's one pile that any U.S. citizen is going to be eligible for. And then there's a pile that certain circumstances might make you eligible for. So let's take the first group. If you're a U.S. citizen, and I mention it that way because being a U.S. citizen is a requirement to attend each of these 5 academies. If you're an international student, there's a different application process that goes through your home country government, and then you become an exchange cadet. So for the Military Academy, the Naval Academy, and the Air Force Academy, and Merchant Marine, there are congressional nominations. And then for the 3 big ones, there's also the vice president that can be a source of nominations. So for congressional, what we're referring to there are the candidates' members of Congress, the 2 senators, and the representative from their congressional district. Each of those members of Congress create their own nomination application process. And that application process runs parallel to the application to the academy itself. So while you're filling out the West Point admissions application and convincing them that you are academically qualified and physically qualified and have great leadership potential, at the exact same time, you are requesting a nomination from your members of Congress. because they get to set up their own process, they can decide if they want an essay, if they want test scores. Do they want letters of recommendation? From whom? How many? How do they get submitted? Do they do an interview? Some very large offices, like the senator's office for a really big state, might not do an interview because it's not really feasible. The congressional district that's rather small might do an interview. They also get to control their deadlines. And this is going to be one of my huge lessons for anyone who's interested in a service academy, is you have to realize that there are multiple deadlines that you have to pay attention to. So you have the academy application deadlines, and then you also have these nomination deadlines, and they might all be 3 different dates. If you miss the deadline, most offices will not consider the request. The second type of nomination that any U.S. citizen can qualify for is the vice president. So the vice president has a similar number of nominations that he or she can make for each academy. These are only used at the big Department of Defense academies. So again, West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy. That application is done online on the White House website, and then supporting documents are provided by the academy that the student wants to attend. The timeline for that one is March 1st of the year before you hope to enter until January 31st of the year that you would enter the academy. That's the second big lesson for candidates, is don't wait to the last minute, because things just happen. You might find that your letter of recommendation is delayed because the teacher is out for some reason, or there's been a little bit of an email glitch and they didn't see the request in time. You might find, oh, at the last minute there's an essay and I didn't realize there was an essay request. So just don't procrastinate. Get it done early on.
And it sounds like you need to start planning if you want to go to the academy well in advance before you graduate high school. It's not something that you can think about your senior year. It's kind of already too late.
You could start senior year, but only probably fall of senior year, or you're looking at attending some other college for a year and applying as a college student. So that is possible. And say for the larger academies, there's probably 100 to 200 students each year that come in with at least a semester of college experience that is as a high school graduate, not dual enrollment or AP credit. But yeah, the best timeline is to start thinking about it fall of junior year, to look at the summer programs that each service academy runs and apply for those. The applications for those are usually over the winter of junior year. And then start actively applying March, April, May of junior year, whenever the academy application opens up. And nominations for the congressional nominations open up around the same time. So we mentioned that the Merchant Marine Academy only takes congressional nominations. There's one other asterisk there. Because they're so small, they don't accept enough students to bring in someone from every congressional district. So they have a representational allotment for each state based on population. So for example, California is allowed to have 19 students come in, which means there will be students with nominations to the Merchant Marine Academy who don't get to go. When we talk about the DoD academies, we're talking again about West Point, Navy, Air Force. And there are additional military service connected nominations that students with certain criteria may be eligible for. Probably the biggest one there is the presidential nomination. And that's one that children of career military or retired military members are eligible for. So as an example, if I had retired from the military, my kids could apply for a presidential nomination. And there's documentation that has to go in, documenting my service and my connection to the kid. Career, if the service member is currently on active duty, then career service is 8 years or more. There's a slightly different criteria for reservists that's points-based, and then retired, either already receiving retirement pay or for reservists eligible for receiving retirement pay. And that does include the Coast Guard. So if your parent's a retiree from the Coast Guard, that creates eligibility. That application is done through a one-page, here's the service connection, here's the documentation that's on each academy website. And a presidential for the Naval Academy isn't a carte blanche to use at every one of the academies. If you also wanted to apply for the Air Force Academy, you'd need to request a presidential nomination there as well. The next category, let's say that you are an enlisted service member and you want to go from being enlisted Army to being a cadet at West Point. There is a service secretary of the Army in this case, nomination available there. These service secretary nominations are only for moving to the academy related with your branch of service that you're in. So Amanda, you were Air Force. You could have used, if you had been enlisted Air Force, you could have used one of these service nominations to go to the Air Force Academy, but not to support going to the Naval Academy. Now we're into the smaller groups. So the next one is if you're doing high school junior ROTC, if you're in college and you're part of a college ROTC unit, there may be nominations available from the senior military instructor or the commanding officer of that unit. That has to be current participation. So if you did it sophomore year and you stopped participating, you're no longer eligible for that nomination. The details for that, you would want to talk to the commanding officer of the college unit or the senior military instructor of the junior ROTC unit. And that's what I like to highlight because especially high school junior ROTC, they don't always know that there could be a nomination to go outside the service of what their ROTC unit's connected to. So, for example, if you're in a junior ROTC unit that's Army connected, but it's an honor unit, that honor unit does have some nominations that they can use for the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy. And we start getting into the deep magic here, right? Lots of details. You have to ask a lot of questions. If you're not in junior ROTC or you're not in a college ROTC unit, then you're not eligible for this. But if you are, start asking those questions of your commanding officer and your staff. I'm interested in this. What's available to me? Can you help me? The last two, children of disabled veterans with service-connected disabilities, killed in action, MIA, or POW. Those, again, are going to be through the academy itself. So those children, surviving children or children of disabled vets, would contact the academy for what that application looks like. And then the last category is children of Medal of Honor recipients. That's a very, very small group, but the academies are dedicated to ensuring that those children are given a place at the academy as long as they are academically qualified.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because when I was reading your article, I was like, there's more. And even the congressional, I didn't really know. I knew vaguely how it worked, but there was a lot more detail in the article that was really helpful to help me. I'm not joining the academy, but I'm doing a lot of research about joining the military. And so it was really interesting to see all the information. And you created a worksheet at the bottom that had all the points that I really liked.
It took me about a week to try to make sense of that so that so that my little infographic gave enough information, but not too much. So we talked about how keeping an eye on deadlines is important. Let's talk about another couple of myths. You don't have to be connected to the member of Congress in order to get that nomination. It's really a constituent service, just like if someone is having some other problem with the federal government, they can reach out to their member of Congress for assistance with that. That's what these nominations are. The intention is that there's geographic diversity, that there's diversity of family background. And this isn't a new thing. It was instituted in the 1840s. So that idea of wanting the academies to represent all of the United States is something that's really basic. Another thing that I think it's important for the students to realize is that there are many more nominations given than offers of appointment. So we talked about that a little bit with the Merchant Marine Academy, but also with the Department of Defense academies. There's around 6,000 nominations given out every year, but there's only 1,000 to 1,200 offers of appointment that are given. So there will be many students who have a nomination who are not in the end offered a seat in the class.
Yeah, that's really important to talk about because it's one of the steps in the process, and it's not like, oh, I got the nomination, now I can go there.
Yeah, it's not a lock. Not at all.
Yeah. So if you're considering becoming an officer in the military, what advice would you give either for the academy, or there's a bunch of different officer programs we touched a little bit about?
There are. So a couple of key pieces of advice that I would give, in addition to the don't procrastinate, because procrastination is not going to be your friend in this process. The next thing would be to make sure that you're reading all of the admission steps that are on the website. I know several of the websites give very detailed step-by-step requirements, but you need to read all of those requirements and realize that those steps are happening at the same time. They're concurrent actions. It's not finish this step and then think about the next step, because if you do it that way, you will run out of clock at the end. You won't have enough time to go through the whole process.
So read all the instructions.
Yeah, read everything. So if let's say you waited to start the nomination process until you'd gotten your academy application just perfectly done the way you wanted it to, you might miss the deadlines for some or all of the nominations. Without a nomination, you will not be attending an academy. It is a requirement set in law. The next thing I would say is the physical requirements, not just the fitness assessment that is part of the application process, but I think students need to really understand the physicality of that first summer, the first year, and military service in general. Even if you are not humping a heavy rucksack on a daily basis, it's a very physical job. It wears on you, and you need to be strong and have endurance in order to get through those demands. So that's something that students should start working on early and consistently. I'm going to say it's super important for women who are considering the military, because there is already in some quarters some skepticism about military participation in the military. And if you can show that you can hang in a run, or you can get over a wall and then put your hand down and help the next person over a wall, that goes a long way to developing your spot in the group. And I think that's something that women should put some concerted effort into building before they show up. The last thing I would say is really work on what's your plan B, plan C, your plan D, and on. If you're interested in going to a service academy, I hope it's because you have an interest in being an officer in that service. And if you have an interest in being an Air Force officer or a Marine Corps officer or a Space Force officer, I hope you would also want to pursue other pathways to that position. The biggest one would be the ROTC programs. So college ROTC programs, which I think you have experience with. There's a scholarship opportunity for a lot of students. You could also participate without a scholarship and still get a commission at the end. It has its own application process. It also has two wheels. You've got a college application that you're doing and then the scholarship application at the same time. That's what's typical for high school students. Again, not as widely known as it should be. And I think too many high schoolers assume college ROTC is just for people who did junior ROTC. The programs don't necessarily overlap. I know students who are getting their full tuition fees, a book benefit, and a monthly stipend, paying them to attend college. It's a pretty good deal. And at the end, they are commissioned just like a graduate from Service Academy is.
Yeah, my husband got a full ride scholarship to college through ROTC. And then I started ROTC and did it for a year, and then I was able to get a scholarship. So there's lots of pathways and doors for ROTC. I probably should do another video.
That's that plan B, plan C. Keep plugging at it. There are additional programs that probably are beyond the scope of this meeting that are for students who aren't in ROTC. The platoon leaders class we talked about, you and I, before this call started. There's one for nuclear propulsion within the Navy. I'm sure that Space Force is going to be coming up with something cool in the future because they're trying to get some smart people in. And then you've got the whole OCS, which is for college graduates who are interested in joining the military as officers. There's a lot of opportunity out there.
There is. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight. I think we're going to have to do another interview just to get
I'd love to.
more out. And I just really enjoyed learning about the process for joining the academies and about the different nominations.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for watching this week's interview. I hope that you found this information informative and can help you in your journey to attending a military academy. If you have more questions about joining, make sure to go to the show description so you can see the blog post that Lisa created to help you as you go through the nomination process. And if you have any other questions that you would like to be answered about attending a military academy, leave them in the comments and I'll work to get videos out to help answer those questions. Thanks so much for watching and have a great week.